Number one, and I said this so many times, I don't think people know that they're in a change management situation. They are reacting to the disruption that is happening to them, and different people will react differently. Change is any disruption that happens within your organization, right? And so there's several major changes that a leader might or an organization might experience and their employees might experience. You're fighting against biology when you're going through change. You're not fighting against people in their right mind. They are afraid. They're afraid of losing money, their house, potentially family, potentially status at work. There's nothing more powerful than a leader to say, hey, we have EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and you can get any type of service, and these are the different services. And I will tell you myself, I have used this service because life is real.
With me today, we've got CJ Gross, leadership and change strategist. CJ, what's up, man? How are you?
Oh man, I'm great. I just got back from SHRM 2026. I was pumped up. I saw Oprah, saw Simon Sinek, had a great session. Other than it was hot, right?
You don't
Like
say.
I got out of a bathtub or something.
Yeah,
Right.
it was. I took more showers in Orlando than in 2 or 3 days, and I've taken all month at home. I feel like is just and I got to tell you, going in and for the audience that's listening, SHRM 2026 just happened, and it was in Orlando, and the humidity was just absurd, which I guess is always that way in Florida. We were in
When
Disney
it's hot.
once in August. Yeah, we were in Disney in August one time, and we
Oh,
never
in
went back.
August.
Never went back there in August. We've always done since then, like February, November, like the normal times, for the
Totally makes
smart
sense.
people.
All right.
That was August was just god awful. It was such a waste. It was so bad. But that's how I felt. That's how I felt, man. But I did not get to see Oprah. I did not get to see Simon. I didn't get to see any of these people because I was recording, which is cool. I mean, like that's what we do. But I
Right.
also didn't get to see Christina Aguilera, and not that I'm like a massive raving fan. Like I'm not going to be up in the front of the stage. Would have been cool, but my daughters like her or some of her songs anyway. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to
Nice,
get to see
nice.
Christina Aguilera. I'm going to get a selfie with her. I got front row tickets, and
Oh, you got some dad points. You got dad
yeah,
points.
but I couldn't even follow through with it because I just said, you know what? I'm not going. We were out to dinner and I wasn't going back. I wasn't walking back. So
Yeah.
anyway, man. All right.
Yeah,
So
I was tired. It's
we're
overwhelming, so many
it,
people.
it was a huge event. It was huge. 20 some thousand, 25,000 they said this year or something like that.
Yeah,
You
probably I know a couple years ago it was 26,000 people
Yeah.
in that conference. Yeah, like an overwhelming amount of people just flowing through the hallways.
Yeah.
And if you're going against them, I feel like you're swimming against the tide. That's how it feels. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
You can't get through them. The fire. Were you in when the fire alarm went off?
Yeah, I was actually
Yeah.
coming in. That was my session was like an hour from then. I was like, oh my gosh, people are not going to be in here because yeah. So no, yeah, I didn't. We didn't. Wasn't a too impactful to my session, but yeah, I was
Right.
in there when the fire alarm went off.
Yeah, it was one of those moments. It went off, and then we'll jump into your topic because we do actually have some cool stuff we want to talk about. Everyone started looking at each other, and they didn't know if
Right.
it was like, okay, it's a fire alarm. Somebody pulled the fire alarm, but in today's environment, people actually thought, and I can see it. I felt it myself. Like, what if it like should we just go? Like we didn't know what was going, and then they made the announcement. Hey, it was a false alarm, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyhow, we're going to be talking about a pretty cool topic, something that you spend, I'm going to say 99% of your days on, and why, yeah, why, so why employees resist change even when leaders think they're communicating clearly. So let's start there, man. Why do leaders think they're being clear during change while the employees are just confused?
Number one, and I've said this so many times, I don't think people know that they're in a change management situation. It's just like if you didn't know if you were doing you signed up to do a run with your friends around the corner, around the neighborhood.
Mhm.
But when you get to your friend's house, they all have numbers on their chests. And then you quickly realize you are in a triathlon. You're an Iron Man and you have to swim, and you're not ready. You're not prepared. You've not even stretched. You don't have the right shoes on. You don't have a coach. You don't have the right fluid. And you right out the gate, you fail because, I mean, even psychologically, you don't understand what's happening. It's a different experience you're going through. And I feel like that's what's happening to a lot of leaders, that they are kind of going through the normal day, the normal routine, but not understanding that you are in a change management situation. What does that mean? That you are in major disruption within your organization, and that you now need a framework and you need to implement methodology around change management, right? Change management is its own um, function, and you need a certain level of um, skill sets and qualities to actually help your team and your company
Yeah.
go through this process. So I don't think people know that they're in change at the end of the day. I don't think they understand it.
Yeah, so you said like 3 sentences, and I've got 40 questions now. So, good, because 'cause we'll have stuff to talk about. We'll have stuff to talk
Right,
about.
right, right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
so let's first define change, and I know that's quite broad and maybe a little difficult. How do we define change in change management in an organization?
Change is any disruption that happens within your organization, right? And so there's several major changes that a leader might, or an organization might experience, and their employees might experience. So there's changing of a leader, right? The direction, the your leader moves to another, leaves, goes out of the company or goes to a different department, or now you are a new leader, so there's leadership change, there's process change. We were doing it this way, now we're going to do it another way. There is organizational structure change, where you go through a merger and acquisition, the organization gets flatter or there's more hierarchy. There is culture change, where you're bringing in a group of people from a different region, or there is a difference in the way that the organizational culture operates. And that can be a lot of different things: personal culture or organizational culture, departmental culture. And then there's the big one. There is technology transformation, is what they call it, right? So, whether you're bringing in AI or you're updating your payroll system, you know, people do not like change.
No.
And so those are the primarily the bulk of the different types of change or um, disruptions that leaders and organizations are going to face.
Yeah. Now, so talk about the companies that you work with, large or small. What size company are you working with?
So I primarily work with companies around 100 to 500 employees.
Okay. What's the difference? Because this is where I'm going with that is what's the difference between 100-person company and a 500-person company in change? I'll give you kind of my thought for this question is 100-person company still feels like a mom and pop shop. You
Sure,
can you can
sure.
actually know the people, right?
Family,
Yeah,
familia.
and 100 people, I mean, probably 50 of them are family, legitimate family,
Yes.
right? So it's like you're still there,
That's
but when you get
true.
to 500,
That's true.
you're kinda like you're going up, right? And you're at that point, I think, and we see this in technology, especially with an ATS and all these others, you're at a point now where everyone doesn't know each other
Right.
and things matter. What you say to your coworker and what I say to my coworker now creates cliques and groups and this and that is very different. But so to talk about that, what are you seeing that's different between a 100 and a 500-person organization in
Sure,
change?
sure. My wife has a medical office, and she just moved, and so I'm fresh from that moving
Wow.
nightmare. And so what I would say is, if you ever moved before, it's like picking up a box of paper, that's not too heavy. You can pick it up yourself. You don't need help. You can move it around. You can go up the steps. You don't need to take the elevator. You don't need a forklift or anything like that. Versus trying to move a you know, uh, 500 or 300 pound piece of equipment. Number one, you cannot do it by yourself. You need tools to help you leverage your energy, and then you might need two or three people to help actually physically move it. You might need someone to run in front of you to actually open the door, to tell other people, hey,
Right.
there's this thing that's coming down the hallway. Where is it going to go? You might have to have a plan. How long is it going to take? You basically have to consider more logistics. You need more manpower or resources. So it's just a different mindset, a different approach, a different process. And again, the tools are important, and the competencies to move something. Like, you don't just move with brute force anymore, right? You now need to think about leveraging it, because we just talked about being older. You don't want to hurt your back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so when you take that into the play of, organizations, 100-person organization, people typically don't go through, hire a change management consultant and use a process and framework. But when you are at the larger, the greater impact of that change, you now need to consider frameworks. You need a communication strategy. You may need a consultant. You need to look at the strategy itself, right? A change management strategy may last anywhere from 12 to 18 months to 24 to 36 months. And then in our work in change management, we always say change is never over, right? You may close that project, but there are the ripple effects of change, and that's a huge difference between a smaller organization and a larger organization. As you mentioned, if you say a joke that's inappropriate to someone, at a smaller company, it kind of stays in that bubble. You're able to talk to people.
Right. Right.
But in a larger company, it goes to HR, pinballs itself around, and before you know it, you got your photo and so I think the multiplier effect is in effect, and you just need different tools and processes and a different ideology to actually for it to become successful. And last thing I will say is the risk is greater.
So what talk about the skill. So you mentioned you need a certain skill set for change management. Walk us through that. What's the skill set in 2026 and beyond? 20, I guess you can't go really too far beyond, but say 2026, 2027. What's the skill set that a company needs to look for in somebody for change?
I think first, someone who has already experienced change, right? We can talk about the really defined attributes that a person might have, like emotional intelligence, social intelligence, cultural intelligence. Now there's this thing called change intelligence. I think we just figure out a way to say things different ways. So there's all these types of intelligences that you have to have in order to manage change. But at the end of the day, someone who is, we just talked about running a marathon or a triathlon, someone who's actually done 4 or 5 of those already, right? They've lived to going through the process and lived to tell about it. That person can tell you the ups and downs and so I would say someone who's actually experienced some level of change. And I believe, my personal opinion is that they should experience change on both sides. I always tell leaders that you have to have your own change story ready. It is hard for me to buy in to someone who's a leader in an organization who's telling me change is okay. I should just deal with it. Don't resist. Adoption is important. All these great things, but they're not able to empathize with my experience. Like, have you ever been laid off? Tell us about the time that you were laid off. How did you experience that? That creates empathy, that creates transparency, authenticity, and brings people in. So I think leaders, that is a skill that you wouldn't necessarily hear. Like, yeah, you want to hear about my failures or my trauma, but if you a coach of mine said once, you cannot take people somewhere you've not been yourself, or you're not willing to go. And if you're talking about taking people through change experience, you have to think about your own change experience to be able to empathize with where they are. That is going to help you kind of operate at the pace that's necessary. And so I would say, if you look at, just to answer your question more simplistically, someone who's already gone through a certain level of change, taking an organization of a similar size, maybe the same industry, maybe not, or an adjacent industry, and then also them having that experience themselves. Do they know what it's like to be?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, and you didn't ask this, but my part of my change story is I went through a merger, an acquisition. I'm sorry, I went through an acquisition. Then I went through a leadership change. Then we went through process change, technology change, and then COVID happened, and we all, and half of the company was let go. And wait a minute, Ryan, all of this happened 45 days before I went to closing on a house that my wife was spent 9 months building. And so to think about the emotions behind that and your personal responsibilities, all those things, you want to know, I mean, you don't want to create anything, fabricate anything, but you want to know that that person, okay, you've experienced it. So when you tell someone else that, it's going to be okay, or, there's an opportunity out of this,
Yeah.
this transition, that for sure, because it's your experience as well.
What's the difference between a company that really leads the people through the change versus the companies that just announce it and kind of hope for the best? And you kind of just gave an example of that. Um, but what's the difference between those types of companies?
Yeah, it's getting in front of the situation, right? It's not being led by change, it's you leading change, right? So getting led is like the dog wagging the tail. You want to be ahead of it. Well, let's just talk about how it might be done in a way that is not, you don't get the return on investment that you actually want as a leader. So it's when change is happening and there's a lack of communication, because when people go into that,
Mhm.
fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn right now, people,
Right.
they do things that they typically wouldn't do if there wasn't a certain level of pressure, right? You're fighting against biology when you're going through change. You're not fighting against people in their right mind. They are afraid. They're afraid of losing, money, their house, potentially family, potentially status at work, a project that they worked on for so long, so you have all of these fears that are happening. So people are responding from a biological perspective to the fears. So in that situation, you want to get, ahead of that. You don't want change to come and very minimum communication, spotty communication, blanket communication. What you want to do is you want to create a strategy. You want to say, "Hey, listen, we're going through this plan, this experience all together. What do we need to do? What do we not need to do?" And the thing you not need to do is immediately start to make decisions and start to communicate in different ways to different groups. You want to have a strategic plan, even if it's written down on a cocktail napkin. You want to have some type of plan that says, okay, this is probably going to last 18 months. This is probably going to last 24 months. Now, of course, COVID, that was hard to have a plan for. But, if you're going through a merger and acquisition, if you're going through any type of technology change, that's something that you can control. This is something that you can plan for. This is something that you can put people in place. And so you want to do those things. But another component to leading through change is to give your people space to process what they are experiencing. When people go into fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, they don't have time to process this. They are reacting to the disruption that is happening to them, and different people will react differently.
Yeah.
So giving them time to really process this, putting the right leaders in place, having a plan. And you have different levels of plans. You have the initial plan that says, generally speaking, we're going west, we're going east, this is what we're doing. And then you have the detailed operations plan, which is correlated with the project plan that says, we're going to take these steps. This is how long it's going to take. Here's the people who's going to be responsible. So you have that overarching plan, strategy, and then you have the not short term, but the more granular plan. So those are just, I mean, there's tons of things. There's probably like 52 items that you would do in a change management strategy, or could do. But those are just some topical
Mhm.
things that I would say people want to consider.
As you're going through this in real time with an organization,
Right, because there's the
does the
theory and then there's the reality, right?
yeah, and then there's the reality of it, yeah. The so okay, so for those that are listening now, right? And let's just based on what we're talking about, let's assume it's the actual right audience, right? This is somebody who's going through change
Mhm,
management from the leadership side.
mhm,
There's a leader out there, right? They're looking for some resources here. What do you tell them in terms of how they cascade this information down into the employee population? Do they and make the announcement of whatever. Let's just use a layoff as an example. We're laying off 50% of the organization, but we have these 37 resources for you.
Sure.
Here's how you do it.
Sure.
Here's all the paperwork.
Sure.
Or is it more human? Is there a story? Is there an understanding between that leader and the organization, and to let them know we're going to move forward in, step one, step two, step three, but not overwhelm them
Sure.
with 37, 50 resources, because like you said, they're not even processing the
Right.
fact that they're potentially getting laid off. They're thinking mortgage, gas bill,
Right.
the
Right.
vacation for the family coming up, daycare for their children. They're not thinking about, am I actually going to have a job tomorrow? They're thinking about now what potentially happened. So how do we build that process with them?
Yeah, so I think you said something in the first part of your question, Ryan, which is, is there a story and is there a phase? So number one, I know a lot of my clients like taking the DISC assessment, right? And there are different types of personalities in the workplace. Different personalities are going to take it differently. Different personalities need different types of information. If you are an I in influence person, you like storytelling, you like the shared camaraderie that we're all in this together. But if you're a D, a dominant person, you like to make things happen. You just want to know, what do I need to do next? And if you're a C, a conscientious person, or compliance, you need you need lots of detail. You need information, information, information,
Mhm.
and that person will probably get the least amount of sleep. So just knowing who you're talking to, and you want to have a multi-tiered strategy. So I'm going to keep going back to, it really depends on the leaders. The change outcome, it depends on the leaders. And as John Maxwell says, everything falls and rises on the leader's shoulders. And so if you have someone who's experienced, who's gone through change, whether you're hiring them as an external consultant or someone who's internal, there needs to be someone at the helm that is leading the change. And when I say leading the change, first of all, just the internal conversation. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What is the process? And absolutely, Ryan, you're 100%, you're spot on. It needs to be a process and phased out. You don't want to just come to someone, a group of people, 200, 300 employees, and say, hey, listen, we're going to lay you off tomorrow. Here's your boxes, put those together. Here's 15 different resources you need. You don't want to, what I call, or someone has said to me before, you don't want to emotionally spam someone, right? They get all of this data. They don't have time to process it. They already have change fatigue, which means that they're being hit with, multiple changes in a short period of time, and they're emotionally tired. They don't have time to think and process what just happened. This is the quickest way to make mistakes. This is the quickest way to get people to lean back and to resist. And it's also the quickest way to potentially end up in a situation, like a grievance or a lawsuit. So you want to make sure your steps are calculated. You don't want to be in response mode yourself, because here's the other thing that leaders and companies, executive levels, middle management, we may be giving them the information to go out and tell them to help
Right.
usher in this change. But sometimes they are in the same boat as the individual contributors, and they're just as afraid, and they've not been given any training. They don't have all of the data themselves, so they don't understand what's happening. It's like the blind leading the blind.
Getting too personal with your employees. So, and I get from experience, and I'm sure a lot of managers will experience this if they haven't. You become close with some of your employees, and almost at a friendship level, if not a friendship, right? And you want to give them extra information, or you feel like
Absolutely.
you have to, right? You feel that pressure. So whether you're a leader, whether you're middle manager, or you're just in the know and you're in that
Yeah,
communication line,
sure.
how do you handle that situation?
One of the things I would say is, the late Dr. Stephen Covey used to say, start with the end in
Mm,
mind. And at this point, it's too late by the time you're going through the change experience, especially if it's a layoff, to do these things I'm going to say. But these are the things that you should be building into your leadership competencies. And this is why it's important to choose the right leaders, because you should have an authentic relationship with that person. It doesn't need to be super personal. It just needs to be built on trust and principles, guiding principles that the individual employees can trust. So if
right.
I trust you, Ryan, the day that you come to tell me that I'm no longer going to have a job there, I'd rather for you to tell me, because I know you're going to tell me the truth. I know that you're going to do it with dignity. I know that you're going to do it in an empathetic way as much as possible. And I know it's going to be difficult for you because I know who you are and I trust you. And I will follow you, follow your lead. And I'm still not going to like it, but the trust is there. And that is what creates the opportunity for people to explore new options because we have this concept called the dip, right? So, well, we have a concept called the change vortex. And when people go through the change vortex, they first have a disruption in whatever it is, their job, for example, or their
Right.
leadership or their processes. Then they have ambiguity, which they don't have the proper communication to know which way is left or right or north or east, up or down. And then they resist. Our body tells us, our biology tells us to push back, right? Because it's the safest way is to fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. So what we're trying to do as change leaders, or as leaders leading the company, is to get people to accept change. The way that you get people to accept change is give them time to process, but you
Hmm.
also got to have allow them to have a psychologically safe space and a psychologically safe
Yeah.
lead. Now it's too late at that time, Ryan, to run out and hire someone. But unfortunately, this is why people hire consultants. And
I was gonna
consultants
say,
get a
so are
bad
you the
rap
guy
because
that
then
sits in the
hey
office?
CJ, hey Ryan, could you come and tell my group who
You're the
doesn't
guy
know
that
you?
sits in the office and they come in, they're like,
So that
uh-oh.
I now, well, we don't do that. We don't involve ourselves in that. But the point is, there are consulting groups out there that specialize in that. It feels very cold, and I believe it's inhumane, and it's not inclusive. It lowers your trust for corporations and companies when you do that. The reality is that as a leader, it is my responsibility. I'm responsible for you, Ryan. You're responsible for me. If this is a core value of our organization, then when I come in and tell you, it was hard for me. It wasn't easy, and I don't take this lightly because I care for you in a way that a leader would. Um, and so it is a hard thing to do, but again, start with the end in mind. If you're going through change or you're about to go through change, start bringing your leaders up to speed. Get someone in there to train them on change management, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, change intelligence. And another piece that we didn't talk about yet, but I knew you were going to ask, Ryan, which is, how do you know how your employees feel? There's a concept that we have called change intelligence. And what that means is it's getting data about your organization to help understand how your organization will experience change. So, for example, there's cultural, assessments that you can do. There is assessment of technology processes. How long ago was your last change? You mentioned about going to the doctor's office. A really good doctor will ask you these questions. They won't just give you, penicillin or whatever type of
Right.
medicine. They will say, well, do you have family at home? Do you have a way to get here? They'll ask all these social questions to make sure that you're going to be okay. And these are the similar things, but not the same things that we need to
Hmm.
be concerned about and consider when our organization and people are going through change.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I want to end it on one thing. You mentioned as you were going through how you as a middle manager who talks to their direct reports and gives this unfortunate news.
Mm,
They do it with trust, with credibility, and you said dignity.
dignity.
I like that. So let's end there. Let's talk about that for a moment. How do we, as a large organization, and it gets hard, right? You have 50,000 employees. You can't just say go talk to every employee. I understand that. But how do we, as we scale up companies, and for someone who's in this situation today at a 500-person company or a 1,000-person company who has to lay off 300 people, how do they do that with dignity and not a Zoom call?
Excellent. And sometimes you may have to do it through a Zoom call, right? You may be a multi national organization or have employees in different locations. And from a timing perspective and resource perspective, you don't have time. Um, so there's multiple ways you can do it. Number one, again, I'm going to go back to start with the end in mind. You are the messenger. People typically say don't shoot the messenger, but you are the messenger. So understand that you should not expect people to experience something different than what you've experienced. And for me myself, I've been through a layoff or layoffs. I've been through mergers and acquisitions, through new leadership. I know what it feels like. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with how I feel in my experience through this, and also I'm going to level set. Right, I'm going to do small groups, right? As small as possible. I'm going to take the extra burden to stretch myself through different time zones to get on those late night calls. I'm going to have my HR partner. I'm going to have, maybe they have EAP, a counselor, or whoever, to also partner with me, because maybe I don't say the right things all the time. So
Right.
I'm going to have that happen. I'm going to make sure that there's a sense of psychological safety afterwards. I'm going to have a communication line so that maybe I talk to 15 people, but everyone knows that I have a truly open door policy, that I want you to reach out to me and talk to me about this. And I'm going to be, very responsive to this. And then, it's nothing worse than telling me something bad's going to happen with no plan at all. Okay, you're giving us this information. When's the next time? What's the next piece of information we're going to get? What should we do in the meantime? It is very hard to trust a person or organization or leader when you don't have enough communication. So trying to get that communication out as soon as possible in the healthiest way. And at the end of the day, like I said, we are human beings. The businesses do not run by themselves. Businesses are without
Sure.
people, are nothing but charters, right? And so people are human, and you never know where your path will cross with the person. It may be reversed. Maybe you end up getting laid off, and that person is now your
Mhm.
supervisor. I had that experience. I had that happen before, and because this person treated me with dignity, I wanted to treat them with dignity,
Right.
and we went the extra mile. So I think really having the emotional intelligence, specifically the empathy. And if anyone wants to do some research on empathy, Brene Brown. It's actually not Brene's Brown framework. It's Teresa Wiseman, the four qualities of empathy, and that is what we really need to have as we go through these experiences of change and change fatigue.
So one final point, because I lied, and you I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking through like, oh man, I
You're
just
a
got
host.
more.
It's okay. I expect that.
Who who takes care of the leader, right? Who listens to the leader who's going through this? Because that's probably one of the most difficult tasks in their role, is
Yes.
to just cut 500 people and affect
Sure.
500 lives, and they need someone as well.
Yeah, so I would say, don't expect people to do what you're not willing to do for yourself. I know this sounds weird because as leaders, especially middle management, we're in this culture where it says work harder, push yourself, until you have nothing left. And if you're doing that and then you're trying to be supportive of another group, you're going to burn out, and you're not going to be able to support your team the way that they need to be supported. So you actually need this. You asked a great question, and I would say, as a leader, you need to have your own personal care plan together yourself. And I'm going to give you some, because we've done some training on this. I will give you some very specific
Mhm.
things that leaders should be doing. Even if you're not like in that type of change, you need to be taking care of yourself. For example, exercising, whether it's taking a walk outside, working on your breathing, because when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, we take short, shallow breaths, and
Mhm.
it doesn't allow us to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze. Counting to three before we communicate. Journaling is a huge um, strategy for processing your thoughts, because if you're going back to back to back to back, you're flying multiple cities or you're on multiple Zooms, these things take your energy and reduce your attention. And so there's so many negative things, but you have to take the responsibility to be able to journal, and then use EAP yourself. There's nothing more powerful than a leader to say, hey, we have EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and you can get any type of service, and these are the different services. And I will tell you myself, I have used this service because life is real. These experiences are real, and you know I've had to get someone to talk to because the pressure is that great. And I want to encourage you.
Right.
Guess what? The chances of that person, the team using the EAP, goes up dramatically, because now I want to mimic what I see in my leader. And I think it's just great leadership.
Yeah, well, and it also opens up a line of vulnerability and communication when
Right.
when the employee population knows that their leader is also using and actually using the resource, as opposed to just saying, hey, we've got this EAP, go do this. We've got 97 services here.
Right. That's
It's
for you, not
fantastic.
me.
Yeah, and they're actually using it, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
CJ, this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much
Ryan,
for
thank you.
sharing. I know someone's going to get at least a nugget out of this. I mean, you've dropped
I hope
so many
so.
dimes on us here. This is
I hope
good.
so. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.